Hello everyone and welcome to my ABCGH Spoilers channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The drama in Port Charles had been building for months ever since Drew Cain was shot in what appeared to be a targeted attack, leaving the Corinthos family and the entire town in shock. Willow Tate, once regarded as the caring nurse who battled leukemia and built a life with Michael Corinthos, found herself in the eye of the storm. Accused of attempted murder, she sat in a jail cell, her world collapsing around her as the evidence piled up, Edward Corinthos's antique gun planted in her possession, witnesses placing her near the scene, and her volatile marriage to Drew providing what many called motive. Michael, her ex-husband and father of their children, had been painted as the victim in the custody battles that followed, but whispers of his own involvement lingered like smoke after a fire. Michael's younger sister, Josslyn Jax, had watched everything unfold with fury and heartbreak. She had always been fiercely protective of her family, particularly Michael, who had stepped in as the big brother she required after their shared losses over the years. Joss had become close to her best friend, Trina Robinson, and through Trina she had met Kai Taylor, the charismatic quarterback who had entered their lives unexpectedly. Kai, with his easy smile and athletic prowess at PCU, initially appeared to be just another college guy navigating classes and football, but his connection to Trina drew him deeper into the tangled web of Port Charles secrets. The shooting itself had remained shrouded in mystery. Drew had been recovering slowly, his resentment of Willow growing with each physical therapy session. He accused her publicly, claiming she snapped under the strain of their failing marriage and his own manipulations. However, the truth hidden beneath layers of lies and half-truths was far more complicated. Willow had pulled the trigger that night, motivated by years of resentment, fear, and a desperate desire to protect what remained of her life. She appeared to be acting alone at first, but the ringtone, that haunting "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star" that Trina and Kai had overheard from another room, was the key clue that revealed everything. Trina and Kai had been hiding in the house that fateful night. Believing they were having a private confrontation, they heard the shots and the phone's distinctive chime and later determined that it belonged to Willow. Michael was initially suspected because he had been seen lurking nearby. His alibi was shaky and the gun could be traced back to the Corinthos estate where he had access. The trial had been brutal, with Alexis Davis defending Willow by pointing a finger at Michael as the most likely culprit, claiming that he framed his ex-wife out of spite over custody. Willow had been acquitted and released from jail to mixed reactions, but the cloud over Michael's name remained. The investigation continued, with Justine Turner eyeing him as the next suspect, and the family fractured further as accusations flew. Josslyn had been devastated. She knew her brother couldn't shoot Drew in cold blood, let alone frame Willow to that extent. Michael had flaws, including pride and occasional ruthlessness in protecting his children, but murder was not one of them. She had confronted Trina several times, pleading for any information, but Trina was torn between loyalty to Kai and the secret they shared. Kai, for his part, had struggled with his conscience. He had initially suspected Michael was guilty, telling others that they needed to pursue the truth no matter who was hurt. But as more details emerged and he saw the toll it had on Joss and Trina, something changed. Kai confided in Trina again one evening following a tense football practice in which his focus had been severely tested. They sat in the silence of the Corinthos garage apartment, the weight of their knowledge pressing down. "We can't let Michael go down for this," Kai said quietly. "Willow got off because Alexis twisted things. But if the truth comes out the right way, it clears him without reopening the whole mess for her." Trina hesitated. Double jeopardy protected Willow, but Michael's life was hanging by a thread. They decided to act, but cautiously. Kai took the lead. He approached Alexis first, not as an accuser, but as someone who had evidence that could change the story. In her office, under the dim light of a desk lamp, he laid it all out. The ringtone, the timeline, and the fact that Willow's phone had rung after the shots. Alexis, floored once more, realized the consequences. She couldn't use it against Willow right now, but she could quietly relay information to Michael's attorney, Diane Miller, to help his defense if charges were filed. Kai did not stop there. He approached Josslyn directly, knowing she needed to hear it from someone outside the family chaos. Josslyn met him at Kelly's, a familiar diner that served as a haven in the midst of the storm. She appeared exhausted with dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights worrying about Michael being arrested. "Kai, if you know something that can help my brother, please ask her." Kai took a deep breath and explained everything. The overheard evidence, how Trina and he pieced it together. How Willow had been the shooter, but Michael's name had been dragged through the mud to create reasonable doubt during the trial. He made it clear that Michael had not framed anyone. Rather, the planted gun and circumstantial evidence had been misinterpreted or manipulated by others during the legal battle. Josslyn's reaction was immediate, a mix of relief and anger at the injustice. All this time, people thought Michael was capable of that. He was just trying to protect his kids from Drew's influence. Her eyes welled up as she realized the full extent. Kai assured her that he would testify if necessary and provide statements to the PCPD to divert any ongoing investigation away from Michael. It was not about punishing Willow further. She had been acquitted and reopening the case would be pointless. It was about restoring Michael's reputation so he could fight for custody without being suspected. The word spread quickly throughout the Corinthian circle. Sunny, ever protective, was relieved but cautious, knowing how quickly alliances changed in Port Charles. Carly hugged Josslyn tightly when she found out. Grateful that her daughter had pushed for the truth. Michael was stunned when Josslyn told him he had been bracing for charges and preparing Diane for the worst, but Kai's intervention altered the course. The quarterback, once an outsider, had transformed into an unlikely ally. Willow, who was still adjusting to her newfound freedom, initially learned the truth in fragments. She was at the hospital visiting patients as part of her tentative return to work when Nina Reeves approached her with a serious expression. "There's talk that Kai and Trina have evidence pointing straight at you, but they're using it to clear Michael instead." Willow had a pale face. She had convinced herself that Michael had set her up, that his bitterness had driven him to plant the gun and manipulate the situation. But now it all made sense. Her own actions had been the catalyst, and the trial's defense had inadvertently cast Michael as the villain. Later that night, alone in the room she shared with Drew, Willow sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone. The ringtone she had once cherished for its innocence now felt like a curse. She knew the truth was out in a few circles, and while she couldn't be retried, the damage to her relationships was permanent. She reflected on her children, W.Y. and Amelia, and how Michael's name being cleared meant he would fight harder for them. Shock coursed through her, not just at the revelation, but also at how close she had come to killing an innocent man in her quest for survival. The following day, Willow confronted Kai indirectly through Trina. She saw them at the university. Trina laughing at something Kai said, and the normality of the situation stung. Willow approached cautiously, her voice low. "You knew all along?" Kai asked, meeting her gaze steadily. "We heard what we heard. I wasn't going to let an innocent person pay for it." Willow recoiled, the word innocent hitting her like a slap. Yes, she had shot Drew, but she justified it as self-preservation in the face of years of control and pain. Yet, here was this young man, barely out of his teens, advocating for justice in a way she hadn't. The shock grew when she learned from Alexis that Kai had gone above and beyond, providing the authorities with a detailed statement that completely exonerated Michael. No charges would be filed against him. The investigation shifted, but Willow's acquittal remained. Willow had imagined this moment differently while in jail prior to her release. Victory over Michael, proof he was the monster, now free, but hollow. She felt the consequences of her decisions. She had manipulated perceptions and leaned into the victim narrative, but it had backfired in the most personal way. Meanwhile, Josslyn felt a surge of gratitude towards Kai. She invited him to the Cordine estate where Michael was staying temporarily. Michael and Josh shared a quiet moment, the first in months free of tension. "Thank you for believing in me," Michael expressed to Joss. She shakes her head. "It was Kai. He didn't have to do this, but he did." Josslyn then pulled Kai aside. "You cleared his name. You have no idea what that means to our family. Kai shrugged modestly. I just wanted the truth out there. Trina and I couldn't live with the lie. The ripple effects continued as the days turned into weeks. Michael regained footing in his custody battle. Free of suspicion. Willow, plagued by guilt and isolation, began to question her path forward. Drew, still recovering, see that at the turn of events. But even he couldn't deny the evidence Kai had brought forward. Port Charles moved on as it always did. But the scars remained as reminders that when the truth was revealed, it reshaped everything. In the quiet aftermath, Josslyn frequently recalled the conversation at Kelly's when Kai chose integrity over silence. It had saved her brother, healed a family rift, and forced Willow to face the reality she had tried to deny. The town had its fair share of villains and heroes, but the most obvious acts of redemption came from unexpected sources. A young quarterback with a conscience who stepped into the light to make things right. Willow heard the clang of metal echoing down the corridor. Sharp and final, as if a door slammed shut on a life she no longer recognized. Pentville had its own rhythm. Boots on concrete, keys jingling, murmured voices that never softened. She'd been counting those sounds for days, using them to measure time rather than clocks. It was safer that way. Less thinking, less hoping. She sat on the edge of her narrow bunk, fingers knotted, eyes fixed on the gray wall as if it would crack open and explain how everything had gone so wrong. Mike Corinthos, her husband, the father of her children, the man whose name had been dragged through the mud, connected to a heinous crime that made her stomach twist every time she thought about it. She was accused of helping cover it up. Or at least that was the story they had told the world. Willow believed it once. Perhaps believed was too strong a word. She had suspected. She had doubts. She'd convinced herself she was protecting her family by not asking too many questions. That silence had led her here. The guard stopped in front of her cell. Visitor. Willow looked up in surprise. Visitors were rare. Most people didn't want to see her again. Her mother had cried excessively. Na had begged forgiveness too loudly. Even Michael hadn't shown up. Not since the arraignment. Not since the reporter shouted his name like a curse outside the courthouse. Who? Willow inquired, her voice rough. You'll see. The visiting room smelled of old coffee and disinfectant. Willow took a seat at the metal table. Hands folded in her lap and braced herself. When the door opened, she expected Diane, perhaps even Alexis. Instead, a young man entered with a serious expression and purposeful eyes. Kai. Willow blinked, perplexed. Kai Taylor had always been an unusual presence in Port Charles, too smart, too observant, the type of person who listened more than he spoke. He was close to Trina and had crossed paths with Josslyn several times. Willow had never imagined seeing him here. Hi, Willow, Kai said quietly, sitting across from her. I know this is strange, but I needed to speak with you. Her pulse quickened. About what? About Michael? Willow's breath caught. If this is about the charges, it's not what you think, Kai said softly. And that's not what the DA believes either. At least not yet. She looked at his face, hoping for clarity. Kai, I don't understand. He leaned forward and lowered his voice. Michael didn't do it. Willow laughed, a brittle, broken sound that surprised her. Everyone says that when someone they love is accused. I'm not saying it because I love him, Kai told me. I'm saying it because I can prove it. The word struck her like a bolt of lightning. How do you prove it? Kai exhaled slowly. You recall the night everything went down. The Metro Court hosted a fundraiser. Power outage. The chaos. Willow nodded. That night played out in her dreams. Twisted and relentless. Michael's name got tied to the missing funds and the altered security footage because someone wanted it that way. He said. I started looking into it after Joss asked me to. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Josslyn. Willow experienced a pang of guilt. Joss had always been fiercely loyal to Michael, even as Willow began to doubt. I found something, Kai said. I actually found a lot of things. Gaps in the footage. Timestamps that do not align. Willow's hands trembled as she discovered who had fixed it. Who? Kai hesitated. Someone's close. Someone has access. Someone who knew exactly where to look to pin the blame on Michael. A cold dread settled over her chest. Just tell me. It wasn't Michael, Kai replied firmly. And it was not you. It was Drew. The name hung between them like a bullet. No, Willow whispered. That's impossible. I wish it were, Kai replied. But Drew was in the server room that night. I have proof. Logs, witness statements, even a partial confession he wasn't aware he was making. Willow shook her head, her world tilting. Drew had been a rock when things began to fall apart. Supportive, protective. He had told her Michael was hiding something. Michael was dangerous. That remaining silent was the only way to protect her children. Drew had nudged her into believing the incorrect version of the truth. Why? Willow asked, tears streaming down her cheeks. Why is he doing this? Kai's expression softened. Power, control, and maybe vengeance. Drew wanted Michael out of the way, and he knew the fastest way to destroy him was to turn you against him. Willow pressed her hands to her mouth, letting out a sob. Every conversation replayed in her head, every carefully planted doubt. Every time she chose fear over faith. I need you to listen to me. Kai stated urgently. I am working with Diane. We are going to the judge about this. But your testimony is important. What Drew told you. What he encouraged you to conceal. That's the last piece. Her heart pounded. If I do this, I'll admit I was wrong. I'm admitting I helped him. Kai responded. You're admitting you were manipulated. There's a difference. Willow closed her eyes, allowing the truth to wash over her, both painful and cleansing. Does Michael know? Kai smiled faintly. Not yet, but he will. After Kai left, Willow remained alone in the visiting room long after the guard informed her that her time was up. For the first time since her arrest, the walls didn't seem so close. Across town, Michael stood in the Cordmain Mansion's living room, staring out the window as rain fell. The house was too quiet without Willow's laughter, without the commotion of toys and bedtime stories. Each room felt like an accusation. You look like hell, Josslyn commented softly as she joined him. Feel worse, Michael muttered. She hesitated before squaring her shoulders. Kai discovered something. Michael turned despite himself, hoping for the best. Which kind of something? The kind that clears your name, Joss explained completely. His breath caught. Are you serious? Dead serious, she answered. Diane is already moving. There will be a hearing, Michael said, his hands shaking. And Willow, Joss met his gaze. She knows the truth now. The courtroom was buzzing with anticipation. Reporters crowded the benches, whispering as Willow was let in. Her prison uniform a stark contrast to the tailored suits surrounding her. Michael looked at her from across the room, his heart twisting at the sight of her. Their gazes locked and everything else faded. She gave him a small broken smile. Willow's voice trembled as she took the witness stand, but it did not break. I was wrong, she admitted, her eyes welling up with tears. I doubted my husband. I let myself believe he was capable of something he would never do. Drew Kane manipulated me. He manipulated my fear and I believed him. Gasps echoed throughout the courtroom. Drew sat frozen, his mask eventually slipping. Willow continued, her words growing stronger. Michael Corinthos is innocent. And I'm sorry it took me so long to say it. The judge listened intently as Kai's evidence was presented piece by piece, dismantling Michael's case with surgical precision. There was no doubt left when the gavel came down. Charges were dismissed. The sound echoed with freedom. Outside the courthouse, Michael pushed through the crowd until he reached Willow. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, overwhelmed. "I'm sorry," Willow said quietly again. "I should have trusted you." Michael drew her into his arms, holding her as if he was afraid she would disappear. "We'll figure it out," he replied softly. "We always do." But as they stood there, relief mingling with lingering pain, one thing became clear. Nothing in Port Charles ever ended cleanly. The truth had set Michael free. But it had also broken illusions, burned bridges, and revealed wounds that would take time to heal. And somewhere in the shadows, Drew Kane watched it all unravel. Knowing that the reckoning was only just beginning, Willow did not leave the courthouse immediately. She stood on the steps, inhaling the cold air as if it were a second chance. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't looking over her shoulder or waiting for another blow to land. Freedom felt fragile yet real. Michael remained close, their fingers brushing, neither prepared to let go. There was so much that remained unsaid between them. Months of doubt, hurt, and silence. But there was also history, love, and a shared understanding that the same lie had broken them both. "I don't expect forgiveness to happen overnight," Willow said quietly. "I just want the opportunity to earn it." Michael nodded. "That's all I can ask for, too." Across the plaza, Josslyn watched, her sharp edges softened by relief. Kai stood beside her, realizing he'd changed more than just one case. He had shifted the balance of power in Port Charles, and the repercussions were imminent. Because while Michael's name was eventually cleared, the truth had triggered something far greater. Trust was shattered, loyalties had been revealed, and Drew's fall would bring others down with him. In Port Charles, justice was not the end of the story. It was only the start of the next.